Galesburg, Knox County region. And so we appreciate the history that we've had with you. We appreciate everything that you've done to spur growth in and around the area, and just your partnership as we move forward now past centuries and actually century plus many decades. So thank you for that as well. I'm originally from Missouri and went to the University of Missouri, and as part of the curriculum for the University of Missouri, everybody was forced, would be the right word, to take a public speaking class. Something that I actually think is pretty good and that most universities should offer. But I had probably of the entire semester that I took that class, one thing that always stuck out to me that my college professor said, and it was anytime you get in front of an audience, there's three things you have to do. Number one, be relevant. Number two, try to be entertaining. And number three, lacking any of the other two, at least be brief. So we'll try and work our way through those, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time going through slides. I'd rather this be interactive. If you all have questions as I'm going through it, please just stop, raise your hand, interrupt me, yell, whatever it takes, and we'll try and make this as interactive as possible, and then I'll leave plenty of time for questions at the end, because I really want you to be able to get out of this any information and items and nuggets that we can provide. As I mentioned, Galesburg, Knox County, and BNSF, we have a great history and partnership. As I drove into town last night, I was just struck right off the bat by how many rail references you all have in your town. I think this is a pointer. Yeah, so you had the cross tie. This was the first thing I saw was this image here on the very far right, cross tie convenience store. First thing as you come in off the interstate, you have that. Then you see Side Tracks restaurant, bar and grill there. Was able to capture, and I hear a train going by right now. So it kind of comes with the territory. Caught a train going right across the Welcome to Galesburg overpass there, so I thought that was pretty neat and apropos. Not to mention the Galesburg Railroad Museum and also the Discovery Depot. So a huge, huge history. You might be wondering what the picture here on the bottom left was. Landmark Cafe and Creperie, to my knowledge, doesn't have a tie to railroading, but we ate there for dinner last night and it was just really good. So I needed to throw that one in, and I believe that they also catered our breakfast this morning. So fantastic job. That was a two really good meals at that restaurant. If you haven't been there, you definitely need to go. Like I said, we have a long history and a long partnership with you all, and we really appreciate and value that. I'm going to go into a little bit about railroading, just kind of a brief history of it, where it's headed, some of the things that we're seeing in the industry, and then specifically what that means for this area and some of the things that we've done and exciting announcements that we've got here in Knox County and Galesburg. So at any point, if I say something that doesn't make sense, or if I throw my BNSF counterparts here, please stop me if I'm starting to get into railroad speak and throwing out too many acronyms and you don't understand something, just stop me. So what fits in just one freight rail car? Enough coal to heat 21 homes for a year, to power 21 homes for a year. This is one rail car, by the way, not a train, not a unit train full, just one rail car. Enough grain to make 258,000 loaves of bread. Enough lumber for 5.5 homes, to build 5.5 homes, and you can get up to 24 vehicles in one rail car. Now those are really small vehicles, I will grant you. Those are not F-150 pickup trucks. But still, you can fit 24 vehicles in it. An intermodal train can move the equivalent of 280 long-haul trucks. That's becoming more and more important. You've probably heard electronic logs that the truckers are now having to use. Workforce restraints in that industry are forcing more and more products onto the railroads, right? Good for the economy. Why would that be good for the economy? We can move more product. Good for the environment. Why is that good for the environment? Railroading is the most efficient means to transport goods. Let me get this right. A locomotive can pull 1 ton of freight 500 miles on 1 gallon of diesel fuel. A locomotive can pull 1 ton of freight 500 miles on on 1 gallon of diesel fuel. The most efficient way to move product across the United States, which is pretty amazing given that this is a 180-year-old technology that is still relevant today, right? Still relevant today. BNSF is a leading U.S. railroad. Now, a little bit of, for those of you who may not be, as us foamers here at BNSF, first of all, you guys know what a foamer is? A foamer is somebody that loves railroading so much that when they see a train go by, they start foaming at the mouth because they get so excited. I had a little dribble come down when that train just went by a little bit. But for those of you who may not be foamers, there are 7 Class 1 freight railroads in the United States, right? And the easiest way to think of who covers what territory, because we don't all have track in the same areas, is that you have 2 Canadian railroads. You have Canadian Pacific and Canadian National. You have 2 eastern, what we would call eastern carriers, and that would be the CSX and the Norfolk Southern. You have 2 western carriers, which would be BNSF and the Union Pacific. And then you have the Kansas City Southern, which really kind of operates north-south down into Mexico and is the #1 mover of freight in and out of Mexico to the United States. So those would be the 7 Class 1s. BNSF, oldest predecessor, was from 1849, so we have a 160-year history. The Burlington Northern and Santa Fe merged back in 1995, and then Uncle Warren bought us back in 2009. So we are actually the only Class 1 railroad that is privately held. Everybody else is a publicly held railroad. We're privately held by Berkshire Hathaway and have been for the last almost 10 years. 41,000 employees. We operate approximately 8,000 locomotives and 1,400 freight trains per day. Galesburg Yard is in our top 3 easily when it comes to moving freight. Is that right, Todd? Correct. All right. I had to double check with my ops guy who's on the ground here. We have about, any given day moving through this area, 80 to 100 trains. As I'm sure you all are thinking, that's right. You have about 80 to 100 trains moving through this area, right? Lots of freight. So when I say that Galesburg, Knox County is at the crossroads of the BNSF network, it really is, right? Freight going north, south, east, and west is coming right through here. So a very key component to our railroad. So we, again, thank you for your partnership and appreciate everything you do. We are a leading, we lead the rail industry in technological innovation. How many of you have heard the term PTC, Positive Train Control? That is a BNSF technology. All the other Class 1s are implementing the technology that Burlington Northern Santa Fe really kind of pioneered. We're also one of the only companies that the FAA has, no, that would be Future Farmers, FAA, has allowed to fly and use drones to inspect our tracks. Everything that we do at BNSF is centered and is with the mindset of safety first. So we use drones to inspect tracks, bridges, those types of facilities on our network, because it's just safer than having an engineer or an inspector climb up on those trellises and try to inspect it. But we are constantly using and improving those technologies. We've got right now in Kansas City a pilot program where we're testing automation of our intermodal facility. So we'll be testing out how much automation can we implement into our intermodal facilities there in Kansas City. Our network, we are, as I mentioned before, a western carrier. So most of our footprint lies to the west of the Mississippi River. A lot of our network is also focused around the ports of Los Angeles and then also the port of Tacoma and Seattle. So our northern transcon cuts across the Dakotas, Montana, and then comes across into Chicago. Southern transcon cutting across from California through Arizona, New Mexico, and then up through Galesburg into Chicago as well. But that's just kind of a snapshot of where we operate. 28 states, 25 intermodal facilities, 32,500 route miles. We are the second longest railroad, so Union Pacific has just over 400 route miles more than we do, even though we haul more freight. 8,000 locomotives, I did have to get that dig. 8,000 locomotives, you can see 10 million carloads shipped in 2017. 10 million units shipped in 2017. And we serve over 40 ports. As I'll get into a little bit later, we've invested over $60 billion since 2000 in our network. One thing to know about all of the Class 1s is we don't receive federal funding for any of our facilities. So everything that we put into our railroad is dollars out of our pocket, right? Out of our pocket, which is a little bit in contrast to what you see with the trucking industry, because they use the roads that all of us pay for, right? So whenever you start hearing talk about, hey, can we increase the weight of our trucks on our roads? Well, that road infrastructure is something that you pay for, it's something that I pay for, we all collectively pay through our taxes. When it comes to moving freight by rail, we don't have any of those funds going to our federal railroads, or to our railroad systems from the federal government. All privately funded through our own business activities. What we carried in 2018, so we break our business units up into 4 different categories, and it's really all based around what we haul. Number one, the first one would be coal. Second one would be consumer products, so chairs, clothes, desks, cars, all of those would fall into consumer products. Industrial products would be the third one. That would be things like oil, steel, sand, aggregates, things of that nature. And then the fourth one would be agricultural products, right? Here you can see what we carried in 2018, and what was amazing about 2018, as Ken said, you guys experienced here in Knox County, same thing we experienced at the railroad. All-time record high. All-time record high. In 160 years of railroading, no railroad ever carried as much freight as what BNSF carried this past year. Ever. Ever. It was almost, as Ken and I were talking last night, it was almost like a perfect storm of all the categories going together. In years past, you'd have ag that would be up, coal would be way down, consumer products might be up, but industrial products was down. As you can see here, we had a kind of a perfect storm. So agricultural products was up 9% last year, and that was even with the issues that we had with tariffs on soybeans, which typically would be a very large product for us to handle out of the Pacific Northwest. With the tariffs going on out of the PNW, we even still topped 9% growth in agricultural products. So a huge, huge record was broke there. Up 2.8% in consumer products, so imports coming in from the ports, consumer products coming over from Asia, up 2.8%. Industrial products up almost 10%. A lot of that was in frac sand, construction, I'm sure as you guys saw too, construction products going through the roof, so a lot of lumber being used, a lot of homes being built, things like that. And then you can see we did have a slight decline in coal, so almost a 1% decline in coal, which we anticipate is going to be the trend going forward. Right? Coal is just going to continue to slowly go down and go down as natural gas facilities take over a lot of those old coal facilities. But overall, 2018 was a fantastic year. We expect 2019 to be a very, very good year. I wouldn't say that we experienced the increase that we saw, the percentage increase that we saw in 2018, but we do anticipate 2019 is going to be another fantastic year from everything that we're seeing in the economy right now. Capital investments, you can see here that we spent about $3.3 billion in 2018. Now we haven't officially released how much that we've spent in 2018 yet. We actually hoped we were going to do that this morning, and that didn't happen. So what I'm giving you is just our projection, but we spent about $3.3 billion on our railroad last year. Now you see these spikes in 2014, 2015 of $5.5 billion and $5.8 billion. That was a direct result of a lot of the products that we were moving across our northern transcon a couple of years ago. We were having service issues. We needed to put a lot more infrastructure in on our northern transcon and on our southern, but predominantly focused on that northern corridor. And so that's the decision we made, to actually go a little bit higher and try and get those improvements done to be able to safely move that freight. And that's why you see that jump. But we're very consistent now with that $3 to $4 billion range of what we spend just to kind of keep things moving on the railroad, and then select expansion projects as well. Where those went, you can see 73% of that was really just kind of keeping the lights on, right? Just trying to keep things moving, trying to make sure that we're running the most safe and efficient operation that we possibly could. You can see 3% went into PTC, again, positive train control, which I mentioned before. Essentially is a safety protocol that we've put in place where we can stop any train from Fort Worth if we need to, right? As a stopgap in our processes. We are now fully implemented on PTC. You may have seen a press release that said we asked for an extension. The reason that we did that was because the way that the federal government wrote their regulations for that particular technology was that even if your railroad was 100% implemented into PTC, if another railroad was using your line or coming across trackage rights for your line and their locomotive was not PTC implemented, you were not considered to be in compliance with that regulation. So even though BNSF had done it, some of the other class 1s weren't quite there yet, so we actually had to go ahead and ask for a extension as well. You can see 9% in freight cars and other equipment, and then also about 15% increase, 15% allocated towards expansion and efficiency, which is really where my group focuses. I keep double clicking here. There we go. So I head up, as Ken said, our economic development department, and really what we're focused on is creating quality growth. Our interests are aligned with what your interests in this room are aligned with, right? We want to see industry growth on the railroad. We want to see jobs created on the railroad. We want to see opportunity created on the railroad. And that's really what my team is charged with. I've got a few of them in the room today. Eric Pitcher, who is our regional guy here for the Illinois and eastern Iowa area, as well as a little bit south, right?
Wisconsin, a little bit of Kentucky.
There you go, a little bit of Kentucky and Wisconsin. Also Mike Ingram, who is our Director of Economic Development for the Northern United States. So they're here in the room with us today as well. And our sole focus on my team is creating those investments in the railroad and in your communities, right? Which is why we have to partner together so well. We're on your side. We're part of the team, right? We're out there trying to generate leads for businesses. We have an entire department, a very big department, our marketing and sales group at BNSF, that is out talking to customers every day, as is my team. And what our customers are typically telling us is, hey, we need to get railroad access, we need it quick, and we need to start tomorrow, and do you have a site ready to go today? Now, unfortunately for the railroad, we spent the better part of the 60s, 70s, and 80s selling land off to generate cash to help supplement railroad operations, right? So we have a huge issue on our railroad, as do many of the other class 1s, that we're running out of property to put customers on. Railroading is very much a fixed asset. We're not going to be able to move the rail lines, right? Nor are we ever going to be able to put another transcon all the way across the United States. It will never happen, just won't. So what we have to do is work within the boundaries that we have right now, and that's some of the programs that my team in particular is spearheading. Again, here's the team and how we kind of approach doing that. Mike Ingram, again, over the Northern United States. We have regional offices. Eric's out of Chicago, that kind of covers this area. And then David Polson is over the Southern United States. We also have a co-location team that's headed up by Carrie Hutchings. They're focused on intermodal, right? So they're out talking to the top 50 BCOs. BCO is a railroad term for beneficial cargo owner. It's who owns the cargo in the box, not necessarily the shipping company. The reason we make a distinction at the railroad between the two is because our contracts are generally always with the shipping lines, who then have a contract with the beneficial cargo owner. So it's a little bit of a disconnected relationship there between railroads and Walmart, for instance. I don't directly do a deal with Walmart. Walmart does a deal with a shipping company. The shipping company then does a deal with BNSF. Does that make sense? I threw out a BCO, and that's a railroad term, and I caught myself, so you guys didn't have to correct me on that one. That's our co-location team. Our unit train team is really, everybody is, You guys familiar with the term unit train? It's one whole train of one product. So you'll have unit trains of crude oil, you'll have unit trains of sand, you may have unit trains of aggregates, things of that nature. So one whole train, one product. Those are very intensive, very specifically designed projects. And so we have that all grouped together under Pat Thompson on my team. And then we have our strategic program. And this is a new team over the last maybe 18 months that we've developed. This is one of the teams that this is the team that really heads up our site certification process. They also work on our logistics parks, our logistics centers, and our transloaders to, again, try to create new opportunity to land the projects that the rest of the team are working on. And I'll get into a little bit of that here in a minute. So how are we doing? Well, you can see here's our trend. In 2018, we attracted almost $3 billion of customer investment. Almost $3 billion of customer investment, and created 1,400 jobs, right? If you ask my team, I think, and a couple of them are here in the room, what they're most proud of as to what we do in our jobs in economic development at the railroad, this would be it. We help create 1,400 jobs, right? This kind of takes me back to how I kind of got into economic development in the very beginning. As you may have read in the little insert there, I worked for Walmart for 12 years before coming to the railroad, and as part of that, got a chance to build a lot of distribution centers. I was in a lot of small towns all across the western United States as well. And one time in particular, we built a distribution center in Sparks, Nevada, just on the eastern side of Reno, Nevada. Never really got to go back to the grand openings of those facilities, just kind of always had other things to do. But for that particular distribution center, our vice president had asked me to go along with him. And as part of the ceremony at the grand opening of the distribution center, that vice president referenced me and my team as the ones who had kind of located that particular site, and then also had seen it through construction. And I appreciated the acknowledgement, raised my hand, and the team raised their hands. And afterwards, a lady came up to me and she said, "Are you the one who built this distribution center here?" And in my mind, I'm thinking, I wasn't out here with like a welder, like building the distribution center. I said, well, no, I said my team kind of is in charge of it, but yeah, I mean, my team is the one that did it. And she said, "You changed the course of my family for history." And I thought, whoa, that's a pretty, I kind of thought we were building a building here. That was a little bit heavier than I had expected. And she said, neither my husband or I had jobs until this distribution center got built. She said, we have 4 kids. We didn't know where our next house payment was going to come from, really where our next meal was going to come from. She said, we both applied for the distribution center. We both got jobs here. Walmart, for those of you who are not familiar with them, Walmart does a really good job, especially in their distribution center programs, of providing scholarships for kids, flex work schedules, things of that nature. She said, I'm able to work 3 days a week, 3 12-hour shifts a week. My husband is able to work 3 12-hour shifts a week. We're able to coordinate those so that one of us is always home with our kids, and we still get 1 day together. She said, not only that, but my kids now have the opportunity to go to school on a scholarship. She said, you changed the course of my family for history. And that just struck me as what we do in economic development is so much more than just generating dollars or tax dollars. It comes down to what it's doing for those individuals in our communities, and for us, those communities that are on our rail line in particular. So again, as we approach economic development, we always do it on my team with a spirit of what is this doing for our communities? 50% of our time, we always say 50% of our time should be spent with the communities, 50% of our time with the customers, so that we're able to effectively make those connections. And we do that absolutely in partnership with those communities that we work through. How we're trying to open up that real estate is really this model here, right? So we think of this as how we create the conditions to attract customers, right? And this can all be boiled down to, if you see those 4 kind of orange columns there, that's really what we're focused on. Logistics parks, logistics centers, site certification, and then transload operators. And I'll go through these pretty quickly. Logistics parks, this is where we have all of these located. The idea being that we end up canvassing the entire western United States with areas for customers to locate to. Again, going back to one of the biggest problems we have right now is we have customers coming to us almost daily saying, we'd like to use the efficiencies of rail, and we're telling them, thank you, we would love to serve you as well, but I got no place to put you, right? I got no place to put you. This, hopefully, will help over the next couple of years eliminate a lot of those issues. But you can see this is really where we've put our flag on the map, where we've said these are the investments we're going to make, this is where we're going to try and direct our customers to. And you can see Galesburg is one of those locations right there. Logistics parks, think of these as big giant facilities. Logistics Park Chicago, you guys are probably familiar with. Logistics Park Kansas City is the second one, and then Logistics Park Alliance, which is down by the Fort Worth area, are our 3 major logistics parks. And this is really where intermodal cars, intermodal traffic is coming in and being offloaded to truck. Big facilities, right? These are 500 plus acres, the big tall cranes. What we've seen recently is that there is a connection that the BCOs, the beneficial cargo owners, the Walmarts of the world, the Amazons, Targets, all of those types of companies, are wanting to locate their distribution centers next to these facilities. And the reason is they can get their drayage costs down to 0. The amount of money they're paying to get their product from our intermodal facility to their distribution center essentially goes to 0 if they're located right next to it, as opposed to being located just 20 miles away, right? So just to give you an example, if you located a distribution center next to our facility that was shipping 5,000 containers, right? They were receiving 5,000 containers a year, versus locating that facility 20 miles away, your annual savings would be almost $700,000 a year on 5,000 containers. Now the Walmarts of the world, the Amazons, the Targets, Kubota, John Deere's, they're shipping upwards of 30,000, 40,000 containers a year. So the math adds up really quick that even though I may spend a hair more on my real estate costs once, my annual savings are going to more than make up for that. So we're seeing these logistics parks fill up with a lot of warehouses trying to locate around those. Logistics centers are very similar to a logistics park, except there's no intermodal concept, right? So I mentioned before unit trains. These do also have manifest locations as well. But this is really one of the areas that we're not seeing private development fill up the space. If we wanted to open a new logistics park, I would have developers line up outside this door and down the street because the compelling business case is such that it's easy to make money and build vertical buildings. We also have rail users who don't need vertical buildings. They need laydown areas. So wind components, sand, lumber laydown areas, aggregates, cement plants, things like that also have to have some place to land, but developers are putting their hand out saying, we don't really want you here because we can't make money building you a building and leasing it back to you. So BNSF now is going out and opening up large tranches of property. We're buying it, we're playing the role of developer and building those facilities out so that we can land those customers. Next, site certification. And this is one that should strike home to you all, right? So I don't know how many of you read a few weeks ago that BNSF just designated the business park out here on the east side of town as a certified site. Not many, I'm breaking the news. Well, there's a few. All right. So congratulations, by the way. Ken's not doing his job. Sorry, Ken. So congratulations, right? Site certification, what is it? Is it just a fancy designation? Is it just a marketing ploy? Well, it is definitely a marketing tool, right? It is definitely a marketing tool. But what I mentioned before was that when we talk to companies, when we talk to site location consultants, when we're talking to end users, the number one thing that they're telling us is that they need to get open quickly. We've never talked to someone who said, hey, we want to build a facility that's rail served, and we have as much time as it takes you guys to get through your processes. That just does not happen, right? So what we've tried to do through our certification process is go through and create the criteria that we're seeing, and using actually a site location consultant, create a certification process that runs all of the traps that an end user would typically say they needed to have or see on the front end of it before you actually have a customer that's waiting to try and get open, right? So what does that mean? It means that Ken had to go through a lot of work to prove to us that that site was ready for development. Utilities, grading plans, access, all of those types of things. For BNSF, it meant that we already have a plan in place on how we're going to serve it, how we're going to get off of our track, how we're going to serve customers efficiently, and more important, safely. Inside the walls of BNSF, that process can take anywhere from 6 to 9 months. So we just run it through that process on the front end before you have customers that are waiting on the back end, right? So while this is a very much a marketing tool, it is also very practical because we're able to get customers into the ground and get them serviced quicker. What does that mean from my side of the equation? From BNSF's side, we're meeting with hundreds of customers a day who are telling us, hey, I need to be rail served, I need a location in the Midwest, what do you got? This is what our salespeople are pulling out. They're saying we have a location in Galesburg, we have a location in Minot, North Dakota, we have a location in Newton, Kansas. We already know we can serve you efficiently and safely at that location, cut 6 to 9 months off the process. Just tell us to go, right? So very key for BNSF as we're out talking to customers. Also very key for you at Galesburg, right? Because as I mentioned before, my co-location team's out meeting with site location consultants, Eric Pitcher, Mike Ingstrom, our team is constantly out talking to customers, so your net that you're casting should have just gotten a whole lot wider. So we appreciate again you guys. We appreciate again you guys going through the time and energy that it takes to get through this process. This is not an easy process, is it, Ken?
Nope.
It took probably 6 to 9 months on the front end to get through this process. So it should mean something, and congratulations. As we look at, whoops, something happened. The computer crashed. As we look at that site in particular, and we were talking whenever, there you go. This is usually the effect that I have on technology, so I'm glad that I was able to do it here too. When we look at the park that you guys have out there, we were kind of talking beforehand, and I was telling some of my team, I said, you know, I travel around the entire United States, and I look at dirt for a living. That's a fantastic site. The grade is pretty much flat, right? Just enough roll to get the thing to drain. You're right on the interstate. You have fantastic access to the interstate. You're right off the rail line. You have all of the utilities in place. The only thing that my only critique of the property was instead of 350 acres, could we make it 5,000? Like that would be the only other thing, but honestly, 350 acres, I can't imagine, and then being where it's located in the country, just on the 2 hours southwest of Chicago, fantastic area of the country. I just feel like it is very well poised for a lot of growth and a lot of business attraction. So again, congratulations on having that asset in your community. It's definitely something that we're going to be pushing to our customers as well. And then if I hadn't broke the computer, the last column that you saw up there was transload. So we use logistics parks, big intermodal customers, logistics centers, smaller aggregate customers, site certification, really our partnership with communities that we work with. And then if we don't have a greenfield site, or if a greenfield site doesn't make sense for a particular customer, we also use transloaders to do this. So there are private industries, some of them may be in the room today, that actually will take your product off rail cars, put it on a truck, and take it to your business. And my team also helps manage those relationships as well. So it's a really good thing that I was like 1 or maybe 2 slides from ending before it broke, because that was pretty much the end of it. I would just like to wrap up my comments. I'm happy to take as many questions as you guys want to throw at me. I would just wrap up by saying again, congratulations. What a fantastic community. Ken and I had a chance to kind of drive around last night and look at everything you've done, the existing business park that you have, which is essentially almost filled up now. I think you have a couple of parcels that are maybe 5, 10, 15 acres. The downtown area is just fantastic. From an economic development standpoint, really you've kind of checked every box out there. It's really a fantastic community, something that you should be proud of, and definitely something that we're proud to be just a small part of. So thank you very much, and if there's any questions, I'm happy to take them or defer them if I don't think I can answer them.
If anybody has questions, we have a portable mic. We'll run out to you. Colby?
Yes, sir.
I noticed in 2017, you really had an even better year than 2008, 7.7 million.
7.7, so in 2017, yeah, the slide you're referencing, I think you did, and I didn't do a good job of explaining that. We had about $7.7 billion worth of investment. Had a couple of steel manufacturing facilities that really skewed that number. So we had 2 in particular that amounted to close to $3.5 billion that really skewed that 2017 number. But in general, if you took those 2 top 2 projects out of the equation, it was probably more around that $3.5 to $4 billion mark. Yes, sir.
I know you've got at least a dozen other certified sites. What's the track record on them? Are they having some successes?
You know, that actually was one of the slides that got skipped over, or that didn't get to show at the end. And it's a quote from the Minot Area Development Council, who we certified a site late last year, it would have been early 2018, I'm sorry. So about a year ago, we certified a site in Minot, North Dakota. Minot just announced last week a new contract for their site that was going to take 75 acres. The exact quote from Stephanie Hofart, who is the economic development person for Minot, was that project came about specifically because of the BNSF site certification. So that's a recent example. We've also had successes in Kansas, Oklahoma, Ardmore, Oklahoma, and then also up in Great Falls, Montana are some of the other ones. So yes, the program is relatively new. We started certifying sites about 3 years ago. So anytime you do that, of course, it takes a little while for word to get out, for us to try and get our messaging out there, and then for people to find us and get their facilities built, but definitely is having an impact. Any other questions? All right, I guess even with the slides at the end not showing it did a relatively okay job of explaining it. All right.
Thank you so much. Round of applause for Colby Tanner. Well, if I'm nothing, I'm punctual, and I will promise to get you guys all out on time. I want to thank you, everybody, again for coming to the breakfast this morning. One more time, if you're interested in signing up for the new Our Economy Update series, talk to Taylor on your way out. She'll get your information. And everybody have a safe travels and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.